students agreed with you, spirit good, body bad, which means our churches aren't teaching this idea. How do we help our churches see the need to recover a proper theology of the body?
Now, that is a very good question, because one of the things I hear again from students, especially graduate students who are older and who've tried to work within their churches, one of the things I hear most frequently is my pastors are not behind this. They'll sometimes agree for me to teach a class, but even then, they sometimes don't even agree to teach the class. I had one of my graduate students was in charge of the women's ministry at a fairly large church here in Houston, and she wanted to teach my book, Love Thy Body. She had an uphill battle. It's like, oh no, those are controversial issues. We don't want to touch those. She gradually won. She's a persistent person, but or another case was I visited with a friend. I visited a Lutheran church here in Houston, and my friend was introducing me to the pastor, and he said, "Oh, you probably have her book, Total Truth, on your bookshelf somewhere." And he looked at her and said, "No, I don't read apologetics." So one of the most important things is one of those maybe the other side, the positive side is my books are being taught in many seminaries, so that future pastors, I do hear from seminarians a lot who are reading my books. So we may see some movement in the future, but Travis, the most important thing is when somebody in their own family is having difficulties. One of my graduate students, the reason he was in my class is because his daughter had announced to him that she was a lesbian, that she was attracted to other girls. And so he came to my class, and for his final project, he wrote a curriculum. He wrote a curriculum that can be used in churches based on Love Thy Body and the other readings in the class. And he submitted it to his church, and they agreed to run it, to run a class.
That's awesome.
And one of the pastors was a former seminary dean, so he had a pretty high bar to cross. But in terms of the quality, he had to be good quality, and so that's what is turning most people around, is when somebody in their own family has an issue. In fact, speaking of which, let me give you one more story.
I love this.
A transgender story. So one of the longest anecdotes I tell in Love Thy Body is a young boy who had gender dysphoria from a very young age. True gender dysphoria usually does start very young. Before he was even walking, I call him Brandon, not his real name. Before he was even walking, his babysitter said to his mom, "He's too good to be a boy," by which she meant, he was sweet and gentle and compliant and the things that we normally associate with girls. In preschool, when his mother picked him up, invariably he was playing with the little girls, not the little boys. By elementary school, he was coming to his parents frequently, weeping and saying, "I think the way girls do. I'm interested in the things girls are. God should have made me a girl." And this lasted for years. This is a difficult. True gender dysphoria is a very intractable issue. And by age 14, he was scouring the internet for information on sex reassignment surgery. So what did his parents do? First of all, they made sure he knew they loved him just the way he was. A lot of parents try to push their child into more, gender conforming behavior. I had a friend when I was in seminary who was a former homosexual. He said, when I was young, I liked music and poetry. And my father was baffled and kept trying to toughen me up by pushing me into more traditional masculine things like sports. So Brandon's parents didn't do that. They said, "It's perfectly okay for you to be a gentle, sweet, sensitive, relational boy. It does not mean you're really a girl. And of course, by the same token, it's perfectly okay for a girl to be gender nonconforming, to be more assertive and rational, take charge. They they even took him through personality tests like the Myers-Briggs test, which
Mm,
show that you could be a male on at either side of the spectrum, or you can be a female on either side of the spectrum, and that he doesn't have to have his life ruled by stereotypes.
mm,
The John Wayne masculinity stereotype. In fact, one of their favorite phrases was this: "It's not you that's wrong; it's the stereotypes that are wrong."
mm,
They said it over and over. They even took him through, by the way, my book Total Truth has a chapter on the history of concepts of masculinity and femininity. And they took him through that and said, look, concepts of masculinity change. They're historically contingent. You do not have to let them rule your life. Just because all
mm,
your friends think this way doesn't mean that this is a biblical masculinity. So and I should say it took a long time, but last time I talked to him, he had in fact embraced his identity as male. He was about 20. He was in his early 20s, and here's how he put it. He said, "I finally realized that even surgery would not give me what I wanted. It would not make me a girl,"
mm,
which
mm,
is absolutely true, biologically speaking. There's a famous TED talk by a cardiologist, and the most famous line from the TED talk is, um, "Every cell has a sex. Every cell in your body is different, based on whether you're male or female." She's a cardiologist, and so her concern was that symptoms of an impending heart attack are different for men and women. And doctors were being trained just to see the male symptoms, and so women were not being treated, and they were having heart attacks. So that was her goal. But her point was, you know, every cell, including your heart cells, every cell of your body has a sex, and obviously you can't change every cell of your body. So it is truly biologically accurate to say even surgery won't give you what you want. So that was something that we can be on the lookout in our families, in our churches, is for these gender nonconforming kids, because they are being targeted big time by transgender activists who are telling them, if you don't fit these stereotypes, you're really the opposite sex. And kids are young enough that they have no defenses against that. There's a there was a news story not long ago about a first grader came home from school and said, my teacher told me that just because you have girl parts doesn't mean you're a girl. Just because you have boy parts doesn't mean you're a boy. So she said, Mommy, what am I? And she literally said, please take me to a doctor so we can find out what I am. And the reason it was in the news is because the parents were taking the school to court for emotional distress for their child.
mm,
But kids down to first grade and even kindergarten now are being taught the transgender ideology, and we really need to fight for these kids. As parents,
mm.
as in the church, we need to fight for them, especially the more gender nonconforming, because they are being targeted.